Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
7:06 here on this Wednesday morning. It's O'Connor and Company, and we've got a really important show lined up. He doesn't get a whole lot of attention. He likes it that way, but he's actually one of the most influential congressmen in this town, especially right now as we head toward this reconciliation process. He's the chairman of Ways and Means, Congressman Jason Smith. He'll be our guest at 8:05. And then at 8:35, Zach Smith of Heritage Foundation. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie. You know, you're one of the most influential people in this town, too, but you don't like to...
Good morning.
You don't like to brag about it. And as we're speaking in superlatives, how about the finest political analyst and correspondent in this town? He's Washington Examiner's own BYRON YORK. BYRON, always good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, folks. Good to be here.
So you did a nice breakdown here. In fact, I used it as a bit of a guideline for our 5 o'clock segment on this group chat signal thing. And it seemed like the major questions were, you know, was it appropriate to use this app for this conversation? Was there confidential or classified information that was shared inappropriately? And how did Jeffrey Goldberg get into this chat? So do we have a resolution on those questions?
Well, you know, on the first one you mentioned, the appropriateness of using Signal, I think that could be the least important of the group in the sense that we had testimony yesterday from the director of the CIA that they use it. Now, maybe they shouldn't, and that's a policy thing, but it's not anybody actually engaging in any misconduct or anything like that. So I kind of put that one off to the side. But we do have these two really huge questions, which is how did Jeffrey Goldberg end up on this text, which is just high government officials? Okay. So you have to remember, he's the editor of The Atlantic, and maybe some listeners don't really follow The Atlantic. The Atlantic is a leading magazine of the resistance. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. As an institution, The Atlantic hates Donald Trump, and it wants him to fail. Okay. So, of course, the editor of that publication ends up on this secret talk among top Trump administration officials. So how the heck did that happen? And then the other question was, given the text, was there classified information involved and was it mishandled? So those are really the two big questions of this whole thing.
Well, I also find it interesting that Goldberg continues to use the word war plans.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that, because it doesn't sound like war plans were actually revealed here.
Well, we really don't know. What Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, came out and said, look, nobody was texting war plans, just didn't happen. And Jeffrey Goldberg, who was undoubtedly on this exchange, said, yes, they were. They were talking about targeting. They were this is the attack on the Houthis on March 15th. They were talking about targeting, how they were going to be targeted, who the targets were, using airplanes with crews as opposed to drones or missiles or something, who was going to be the next targeting, what the sequence of targets were. So he's saying, look, they were discussing, it's just flat out true, they were discussing war plans. So we have this conflict here. And I'm not actually taking sides on this right now because we need to know more.
No, and that's why we like your reporting on this as usual, BYRON.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw Jeffrey Goldberg. I mean, the obvious, next step here would be you've got the CIA director and the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, yesterday saying under oath that there was no classified information shared on this. And Jeffrey Goldberg saying that he doesn't want to release everything else that he has because it is classified. So Tim Miller, of all people at Bulwark, had him on a podcast yesterday and said, listen, they say it's not classified, so why not release it all? That seems like a logical question. Where does this stand now? Why wouldn't Jeffrey Goldberg release this?
Well, you had, in addition, Michael Waltz, the national security advisor who's in the middle of all this, appeared on Laura Ingram's program on Fox last night, and he said flatly, no confidential information. On the other hand, so Laura asked the same question: is okay if it's not confidential? Are you okay with just making it public? And he said, no, I'm not comfortable with that because it's the kind of operational stuff that we don't want to just advertise. Now, I do understand that in the government there is a difference between something that's just unclassified and then something that's actually public. I mean, there's lots of things that are not classified that the government still doesn't want to make public.
But still sensitive, of a sensitive nature.
Right.
Yeah,
Sensitive, exactly. So I think that's actually true there. But clearly, there were these texts. There are documents, essentially, electronic documents for somebody to look at and tell us what was put out on the text. And was it classified at the time it was put out? Has it later been declassified? I don't know. But this is something that can be discovered.
Right. Byron, could you also shed some light on that? Because there is a reference in this text exchange about switching to high side. They say, we're talking about this on Signal, but I've actually shared things on high side. That sounds like a higher encrypted level of communication, which tells me that they were cognizant of what they were saying and the platform they were saying it on.
Yes, that is a cool national security term for let's discuss this in a classified setting. So obviously they're using Signal, which is commercially available. You can get it at the App Store. And the government, has spent billions and billions of dollars creating all sorts of highly secure communications.
Sure.
So I think simply by saying we need to talk about this on the high side, they're saying, okay, look, we're on Signal now, which is kind of encrypted and kind of secure, but not really big time secure. So let's discuss this important thing on our secure government system.
Julie, do you have anything else on this? Or let me ask, I'd like to follow up,
Can I raise
and
one
I
more
don't want to
issue
push
with you.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Well, there is, I said the two big questions are how did Goldberg end up on the text and was classified information involved? For a lot of people, there's going to be one bigger issue, which was somebody in the Trump White House in touch with the leader of the Trump-hating Atlantic?
Right.
That is, so everybody is saying, okay, well, if this was just a mistake, why was Jeffrey Goldberg in your contact list? Had you been in contact with Jeffrey Goldberg? Because Jeffrey Goldberg is not going to, everything he writes is an attack on the Trump administration.
Absolutely.
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And so, and look, that's how our media system works. That's totally fine. But I could see the Trump White House saying, why were you in touch with Jeffrey Goldberg? And that's another question that we don't have the answer to.
So, but to be clear, National Security Advisor Waltz he says, I don't know how this happened, but I take full responsibility. Yes. And that's that's what an officer in the Army does. That's what, I mean, the buck stops with him and he's taking the heat for it, but it could very well have been someone on the staff who did this. I got to ask you something. And again, I don't want to pit you against other journalists. You all go about your business the way you do. But Byron, if this happened to you, if you suddenly saw on your phone that you were included in a Signal group chat of this nature, would you lurk there and just sort of, see what happens because of the newsworthiness of it? Or would you sort of alert them and say, hey, guys, just so you know, I don't think I'm supposed to be here? It's a kind of an ethical quandary for a journalist, I would think.
Yeah, well, Goldberg actually kind of addressed that question by saying that when it first happened, when he was first invited onto the text, that he didn't think it was real. He thought he was being spoofed or something was going on, but that it was a fake deal. And so he stayed on, and he doesn't really become completely, totally convinced that, hey, this is actually real until the attack on Yemen takes place. My feeling is if something like this had actually happened, I probably also would have hung around for a while to see what this actually was. It was so unusual that I would say it was. But on the other hand, after it happened, I might identify myself. Now he took the opportunity to write a big magazine piece. I mean, he could have actually just gotten in contact with the White House saying, you may not know me, or maybe you do, but I'm the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic Monthly, and this just happened. He could have said that too.
All right. Well, thank you for that. As usual, very frank and straightforward and logical response to this. As you cover all things D.C., it's a rare approach to this business, Byron, and we always appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, folks.
I for one, I mean, listen, obviously, biggest concern here is how Jeffrey Goldberg gets included in this. My second bigger concern is that our national security advisor is using goofy emojis to communicate with the national security apparatus. That's just, little a fist bump, American flag fires. Like,
maybe he's got teenagers.
Is he doing?
Maybe he's got teenagers.
Yes, it is. It's sort of like MAGA bros, It's 7-7.